Okay, so this video has been requested by the Electrician's Tool channel, who watched my comparison of the Fluke 1587 FC there on the right against the MTR 105 from Mega that's lurking away in the background. So he asked to see the Fluke 1587 FC compared to the U1461A there on the left. So to kick off the comparison, I'll start with the accuracy comparison table. Stick the table up on the left here, and as you work your way down it, you can see for the top half of the test results you're looking at very little difference between the two units. The 1587 FC does appear to be just that little bit more accurate for all the AC volts, DC volts, and AC and DC current readings. However, when you look at the actual practical transducer tests measuring the output of a transducer, you can see that both instruments had the same accuracy. Again, for resistance it flips a little bit. With the U1461A it is just that little bit more accurate, but for practical purposes there's no real difference between them results really. And then you get onto the capacitance, which you do start to see a bit more of a difference, 0.5% difference in accuracy between the two units in the favour of the Keysight unit there. And moving further down, you then take a look at the insulation testing function, and this is where the 1587 gets a little bit of a kick in really, pretty similar to comparing it to the MTR 105. You see that the Keysight has much better control over its open circuit voltage test and its short circuit current tests. Again, the 1 milliamp spread, not such a differential there, but still in favour of the U1461A. And then with regard to the actual insulation resistance readings, these were done over the reduced range of the Fluke 1587 that can only actually go up to 2.2 gigaohms against the 260 gigaohm range of the U1461A there. But you do see that the 1587 FC is just that little bit more accurate, but again, for practical purposes you won't really see that difference. And then we move on to the final test, which was phase resistance, and you see the 1587 is quite lacking with that test there. The U1461A, not only was it more accurate, it uses the 200 milliamp test current against the about 1 milliamp test current of the 1587, and also it has a much greater resolution and a much greater test range than the 1587 does have. And overall you see the U1461A is just a little bit more accurate than the 1587 when averaging out all the test results there. Okay, so that's the accuracy tests all done. Now we'll move on to the actual kit and what the kit contents are. So both instruments come in a hard case. They're both pretty much a comparable size to one another. The difference you see is when you actually open the cases up, and you see with the Fluke over here on the right, the meter just sits in the little pocket over here, and the leads just get piled into the other compartment, and you have a spare compartment up here as well if you want to put a bit of tool foam in there and stick some stuff in there, and documentation holder on the right there. So in comparison, the kit for the U1461A here, this has got moulded sections for a lot of the stuff. The meter here sits very snugly inside here. It can be quite awkward to pull out sometimes. The probes themselves, you get 4 probes with this one, and they each have their own little holder in there. In this bottom compartment you get leads and a set of croc clips. Put them out of the way because you don't get them with the kit. A set of croc clips here and leads, and then this here is the Bluetooth adapter that is a separate unit for the Keysight, but it's actually built in on the Fluke unit. In the other compartment you get a T-type and a K-type thermocouple there. You get USB lead that is an option to the Bluetooth unit, so you can plug this into the back of the meter and direct into a computer if you want. And then you get a remote probe, which is still bagged and I don't use it an awful lot. Lead and probe wise, bring my terminal block to the front. So crock clip wise for the Keysight unit, again loads of capacity within them, it easily gets around an M12 nut and the M8 stud there, no problems. Same with Fluke, it's perfectly good capacity on them, not an awful lot of difference between either of them really, perhaps a fraction. Yeah, a little bit goes to the Keysight, but these, I've always found these adequate for anything I've been testing on both of these units. Probe wise, a little bit of a different story. You get shielded GS38 and non-GS38 with the Keysight unit. Obviously these will go in to any terminal that you have, even into the little 2.5 terminal here, no problems, still maintaining the GS38 protection that is preferred in my country. With the Fluke, you just get one set of probes that has a GS38 cover on it. It's removable, gives you a 4mm adapter if you want it, but with the tip on I can get into the 35s here, 4mm I can't get into, 2.5 I can't get into, the cap off, yeah, I can just about get into the 2.5, easily into the 4, and then the other terminal there's no problems. So yeah, for me those probes from Keysight do take a fair bit of beating. They are an exceptionally versatile probe that they've included. In regards to the remote probe, these are bespoke to the units. So the Fluke one here, similar sort of probe to the standard probes, and it goes in, and again doesn't go into any of those other terminals. For the Keysight, get him out the way, where's he gone? So the probe, the remote probe is slightly different for the Keysight. Different principle here. You have the remote button and the adapter and lead again, which is bespoke to the Keysight, but it's been manufactured to work with a standard probe that they supply there. So you plug it in like that, and again you've got the functionality of these probes that I do like. So a slightly different approach to the Keysight unit. So yeah, slightly different approach with regards to the remote probes with the Keysight and the Fluke, and this is my slightly preferred option. It's a little bit more versatile than this unit from Fluke. Okay, let's get this all boxed up and we'll move on to the actual meters themselves. So looking at the instruments in a little bit more detail, both of them have a rubber boot surrounding them that you have to remove in order to gain access to. On the Keysight they have separate battery and fuse compartments, and with the Fluke you just have the one compartment here for the battery pack and the fuses. Both of them are a little bit of a wrestle to get the cover off. This one is by far worse than the Fluke. It's a very tight cover on this one, but it does come off to give you access. Termination wise, at the front here we have standard jacks for the voltage, ohms, continuity, temperature on this side for the Fluke. Current jack to be used with a common for 400 milliamp current measurement, and then the insulation function is a special socket up here, unique for it, and using the positive terminal of the current function. And I've said about this before, that is something that I just do not like. It's forever catching me out, putting them in the wrong plugs when I'm switching to insulation testing and back to voltage measurement. And the fact that they're using a current terminal for a voltage function for me just doesn't sit right. And in contrast, for the Keysight here, you have the common terminal. Over this side we have diode, voltage, ohms, capacitance and temperature, and you have the ability to put the remote probe in this as well. On the other side is the earth bond test, which is a 200 milliamp test current for continuity, and then the microamp per milliamp function on this side. Again, it will take the remote probe, but that's just for using with the earth bond measurement. So both instruments switched on. You can see the two displays, fairly similar to each other. You do get the bar graph up here on the Keysight that you don't get with the Fluke over here. They're both fixed mode time set to AC volts. They have that same function. Both of them have a low pass filter that can be enabled to cut out high frequency when you're working on inverters. One other function on AC volts that this instrument has that isn't on the Fluke is Vsense Mode. You can hold in, and then you've got a non-contact voltage sensing function on this instrument. Should you want that, obviously not quite as user-friendly as a normal voltage probe. Volts AC-DC normal mode for this that the Fluke doesn't have. It only has AC and DC volts, which are separate functions, whereas you can do all three with this. That can be handy, I guess. You've got the AC mode, the DC mode, and the AC-DC mode, but sometimes the meter does, in automatic, it does try and favour the predominant voltage that it's actually measuring, which can catch you out sometimes, whereas this, you've always got the option of going between AC and DC. I do tend to prefer split measurements like that, really, as opposed to the automatic option of this Keysight unit. And we also have the same function but in millivolts down here, whereas it only has DC millivolts, and both of the instruments have the temperature function on there as well. Going further around to this side, we have the current measurement, AC and DC again, and obviously you just heard the alarm going off there to warn you that you've switched to a current function. And we have this over here for the Fluke, and again, perhaps not quite as loud an alarm, but you do get the visual display with this as well to say you've switched to a current function. Both of them are AC-DC up to around about 400 milliamp. Both of them have fused inputs. So one major difference with the current function with regard to the Keysight that the 1587 doesn't have is when you're measuring transducers, you can pick up the actual percentage. You switch through the ranges. There's DC, AC there, and here you've now got a special 4 to 20 milliamp function specifically for measuring the output of transducers. This doesn't have anything like that. You can just go between AC and DC, and that's your lot. So this is quite a useful function that I have on this unit that I use quite a lot of. So it gives a 0 to 100% ratio output with respect to the 4 to 20 milliamp input that the instrument is reading, showing minus 25 at the moment because it needs to see 4 milliamps to actually display 0%. So that's a nice function that this instrument has that the Fluke doesn't have. And what I didn't mention, I should have, both these instruments are Cat rated, Cat 4 600 volt, Cat 3 1000 volts. They're both the same in that with regard to the voltage function. And then on the rest of this dial you have over here ohms and capacitance. Again, you've got the warning when you switch back. Same with the Keysight, you get the warning again when you switch back. On this one we've got the ohms, capacitance, diode and continuity all on this function, whereas just the ohms and capacitance on that function. Capacitance wise, that is one of the functions, in fact it's the only function where the Fluke 1587 has a wider range than the offering from Keysight. This will go up to 10 millifarads, this unit will go up to 40 millifarads, so quite a difference there in terms of capacitance measurement capability. For the diode and continuity you have to flip it round, which covers the other two functions on this same position on the Keysight. What the Keysight then has extra that this doesn't have is an earth bond test, which is a 200 milliamp test. Again, it's telling me because the lead jack is a different input, so it gives me that warning. And this is what's required under UK wiring regulations for testing earth continuity on devices and installations, at least 200 milliamp test current. It's also very handy for measuring motor windings. As you see from some of the test results, you see this has a very good resolution, much better than the ohms function of the Fluke here. That's quite poor for this sort of device that's made for testing motors that you do phase balance on. I find this ohms function really lacking on the 1587. So another issue that I've had here, let's put it there so you can see a bit. So another issue I've had here with the ohms function is there is no zeroing of the leads on this. You kind of have to short them, take a measurement and subtract that from each of the readings that you make. Not particularly good when you're doing low ohms readings. For this instrument you do have on this one is the null function up here, which is very handy, and really I'd have expected the Fluke to have come with that function as well. Flipping over on the other side for the Keysight, so the instrument resets itself, you move to the insulation test functions, 50, 100 volt, 250, 500 and 1000 volt, all separate selections on the dial on the Keysight, whereas flipping them around to the Fluke, you see here that it's all on one function switch, and then you manually change the range electronically between the same set of ranges, I believe, 50, 100, 250, 500, 1000, yeah, so same set of fixed ranges. What you do have with this instrument is the ability to go into the menus and page through them, and when we get there, so there's the insulation test there. I can actually change the voltage to within a certain parameters. It's not a fully variable voltage in the manner that Mega do to theirs, but there is a lot more variability with the test voltage than there is with the 1587 here. And what you also have here as well is, okay, it's on this menu here, you have a ramp test with this. I can set up a ramp and a trip current for when to stop the ramp during the test. That's quite good for testing varistas if you have them. This doesn't offer any test facility in that manner. From the back, taking it back to there, you do have on this that you don't have on Keysight is this smoothing function for when you carry out insulation tests. Nothing like this on this unit. So on insulation test function, all of the instruments have DAR and pi. As I said before, this only goes up to 2.2 gigaohms, but that's only on the 1000 volt test voltage at 500 test voltage, which is where I do the majority of my testing. This will only go up to 550 mega ohms. In comparison, this will go up to 260 gigaohms. So much wider range that suits my style of testing much better than the Fluke does. So neither of the instruments actually have any onboard memory as such. The Keysight does save the last readings per function. So if I move to time and I move to DAR, that's the result of the last DAR test that I did at 250 volts, and I can move it on to pi, and that was the result of the last pi test. I can then actually page through the readings. This is the 1 minute and 10 minute readings, and then your actual value. That gets wiped the next time you do a successful DAR or pi test, and it'll do it for each range. I don't know what I've got on here. What did it? Yeah, so 100 volts, you can see it's a different value, and it will save it on whichever test voltage I did. This has nothing like that. In order to get any information out of this, you have to have it connected to the iPad, which I've shown in other videos. That works very well. Bluetooth connection, Bluetooth module is built into this, no problems whatsoever, and you get a full insulation resistance curve out of it, saving around about 4 test points per second. So an awful lot of data, but alongside the ability to record an insulation test, it can also be used to log voltage and current functions as well. Whereas the 1587 only connects to iPad, this will connect to a Windows laptop through Keysight software, either via Bluetooth or via the USB adapter. They just plug into the back of the unit here. This is the Bluetooth, which you can see just snaps on there. Oops, what did I press there? Oh, and the cover falls off. Obviously you do need two separate batteries for this, which is a bit of an annoyance, and obviously being an individual separate unit, there is the potential to lose that, I guess, or damage that, but I believe you can buy that separately. This has proved to be just as reliable as the Bluetooth connection on the Fluke. Never had really that much of an issue with it. The one advantage this setup does offer you is that you can also connect this to an iPad and carry out the same sort of data recording on an iPad or on a Windows computer, whichever is your preference. You have software available for both systems with the Keysight. And that's pretty much the basics of these two units. Okay, so I guess it's decision time as to my preference between these two instruments. To be honest, whereas when I compared the Fluke against the MTR-105, there's kind of a position for the Fluke to run alongside the MTR-105 that's a dedicated motor testing instrument really. But what the Fluke brings to that package is to have better voltage and current functions than the Mega can offer really. Whereas when you compare it directly to the Keysight here, the Keysight pretty much trounces the Fluke in every single aspect of the testing capabilities. The downside, of course, is that comes at a price. Retail price wise, the Keysight is around about £1,100, whereas the Fluke is £785 based on recommended retail prices in the UK. So you're looking at a good couple of £100 difference there between the two units. However, for the Fluke, it's available from a lot more sources within the UK. And I've seen this instrument available for around about £540 from pretty respectable instrumentation outlets within the UK. I have even seen it on eBay for £450 in the UK, allegedly brand new, unused, unopened units. In contrast, you just won't see that with Keysight instrumentation. This unit, I've only ever really seen it available in either RS Components or Farnell's, and it pretty much goes for the recommended retail price within those two sources. Sometimes you get a bit of a deal on it, but that's quite rare. So looking at it in that terms, you're then looking at almost £600 price differential between the Fluke and the Keysight, and that's an awful lot of money. So yeah, the Keysight to me is better. It has a lot more functionality. It suits my testing role much better than the Fluke. It gives the MTR-105 a much better run for its money than the Fluke does. But as I said, that's at a price, and we have to decide as individuals whether that price is worth paying, I guess. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope you found it useful, and I'll see you again in the next video.